Developing musicianship online.
Hello, and welcome to DM Online. Today we're going to have a look at Logic Pro. Perhaps you're a user of Garageband and you've decided it's time to upgrade. Or maybe you're new to music altogether and you want some basics just to get you going on Logic Pro. We're going to explore what that transition looks like between Garageband and Logic Pro, and some of the benefits and tools that are useful to you once you get into the Logic Pro environment. So, let's get going. To start off with today, we're going to transfer our old Garageband project from an earlier episode into the Logic Pro environment, where we can find out what the tools are available to us that could have enhanced this project. So, in order to do that, I'll just remind you of the project first of all that we're looking at. So the project was the original jingle for the show, which had swing drums and a walking bass and some vocals, which you still hear now, but in a different realm. Okay, so I don't need GarageBand open to do this. All I need to do is know where that GarageBand project is living. I go into Logic Pro, create a new, although the new one will actually get closed again, so I don't know why I have to create a new, but I just do. Okay, over the right hand side there is a browser button, and if you go to the all files side of the browser button and then you click on the table view, it gives you this little pathway. So from there it's a bit easier to navigate. For me, I'm going to my desktop where I've got a folder and I have pre-saved the project into that folder, so it's easy to find. Okay, I open it and then it says close the current new file which I just created, and I don't need to save it. Okay, I give it a name, so this is going to be my Logic version of my GarageBand project, and it complains because I haven't updated my Logic Pro, but it still opens anyway. And there we have it. This is the GarageBand project with the same Kyle drums and extra bits and pieces that I didn't need. And it's ready to go. If I hit play, it's going to sound just the same as what I did before. But it is more powerful than before. For example, if I set up a MIDI track and I just make it the drums, sometimes it's the easiest to do just by going plus and adding a software instrument, because it's going to give you the library of software instruments to choose from and you don't have to navigate your way back to the start again. So we're looking at that SoCal drum kit, which we should be able to find in here, and if we can't, then we're just going to pick a different drum kit. Okay, so there's my drum track. Now I'm going to take Kyle's drumming and I'm just going to drag this, I'll duplicate it so we don't lose Kyle. Drag it down to there. Now I have a MIDI version of Kyle's drumming. Now the benefits of the MIDI version of Kyle's drumming as opposed to the yellow version is that if I drag it by a beat, it doesn't change. If I drag Kyle by a beat, it throws everything I worked at to get that sound of Kyle out the window, and I wind up with something I didn't ask for. So at this point, if I just play the drum kit, it's a different drum kit, but it's the same drumming. Now that also has its advantages, because now I can actually play around with some other drum kits. Plus, I can open the piano roll version and see a little bit more detail about what's going on. So if I'm really fussy about the way it's played, I could start looking at some other components and the MIDI mapping of the drum kit to perhaps put some extra toms in or something like that. So that's really cool that you've got that access. You've got the score version, and because it's swing drums, you'll see it's written dotted, but it's not exactly how it plays. This swing is still swing because I haven't quantized it. Okay, alright, so that's the first thing that's a benefit in this program. The second thing, and I've mentioned this in many episodes, is the mixing desk, which is no doubt the most powerful tool when it comes to outputting your music. So I'm just going to turn the stereo off here, and I'll open the mixing desk, which has got a mixing desk button right next to the scissors. You may recall in Garageband it's just got scissors and the dial, which is the effects, but now we've got this mixing desk component. Now you can float mixing desk, and I sometimes prefer to have the actual mixing desk floating rather than stuck down the bottom there. Okay, and here is what that mixing desk looks like. Now, if you're not familiar with mixing desks, I'll give you some absolute basics. Mixing desks travel top to bottom. So the last thing that's affecting a mixing desk is the volume slider. The first thing that affects a mixing desk is the input. So you've got the input at the top here. Now they've also put the EQ and things up here, and we'll come to that. The EQ graph actually is affected by the EQ and the audio effects. So in essence, this track actually starts at input, not down up there in this settings thing here. Okay, so if we were to click on inputs, we see 1 to 28 inputs. Now that is coming from my console that I have connected to Logic, which is at this point in time the PreSonus. If I connected another unit, I've got the Behringer Euphoria, then I would have 2 input options, because that's all it has. Okay, in the bus, now busing is different. Busing is not like input in a sense of what your console is that you've got connected. Buses, there are many buses, and basically what that is a way to assign an address to something you want to send somewhere. So for example, you'll see a lot of automatic buses produced by the software itself. And then if you look at where the buses lead, so the input address is where you'll find where the buses are leading to. So I'm seeing bus 1 listed here, but actually they don't have a bus 1 up the top. So bus 1's going nowhere. Bus 2 is also going nowhere. Okay, but bus 3, you'll see bus 3 has an address up here, B3. Don't get confused with the B3 organ that they've put in the MIDI. B3 is the bus over here in the ambience. So that's a reverb. They haven't got it turned on, but if I want some of that reverb in my mix, all I have to do is turn that dial up. Now I've got some of my mix going to bus 3. So you often find the buses are mentioned in the sends. Send the signal, a little bit of signal, to a reverb unit and or an effects unit of some kind, and it will come through the mix. Okay, you can output to buses, and I'll come to that later. There is a good reason to be outputting to buses. Okay, and then we've got the effects. So we've got the effects units for that channel, followed by the buses, which are like alternative effects that you can or cannot add depending on how you feel. And then we've got the output, which currently is stereo out for everything. And then we come to the pan, left and right, and finally the slider, which is going to give you volume. And you'll notice the slider is all set to 0. So what we usually do is we try to preset the volume so that when the volume hits the slider is set to 0, and then we can give it a boost or give it a drop while it's playing live, but we know that consistently we have the same level on our tracks. Okay. That's at this point in time all you really need to know about mixing desks. The stereo out is this master track. Okay, so that's a great tool. Now, let's have a look at our project itself. What can we do here that's different from being over in GarageBand? Well, I come back to the buses. Our stereo drum kit right now is kind of buried in the mix. Everything goes to stereo. It's just like blah, straight out to the stereo channel. But what we do now have with the bus system is control of the space. So that means that I can create pans left, right, center that broaden the amount of stereo space that certain instruments take up. What a lot of mixers like to do with drum kit is the following. We take it out of a bus. So instead of stereo out, we're going to bus it out to somewhere. Now, lots of those buses are already used. I could start at bus 7, but just for convenience, so I can find it, I'm going to turn it to bus 10. Now, when you do that, you'll find an auxiliary channel appears in the mixing desk. In this case, it's called auxiliary 5. We actually need 3 channels for what we're about to do. So by going to options and create new auxiliary, you can create 3 new auxiliaries, and we want to first of all look at the input. So in this case, my input is bus 10 here, but over here you see it's got input 1 and 2. We want that to be bus 10, and we want the next one to be bus 10. Down in the pan, actually we'll title it first. So this is going to be drums left. This is going to be drums right. And this is going to be drums center. And we want them all at this point to be -0, although for this technique to be most effective, normally we drop the left and right by 2 decibels. So that's 2 decibels lower than center. This is a matter of personal taste, but once we've got that, swing all the way left for our left channel, swing all the way right for our right channel, and leave the center where it is. Now that we've done that, our drums is going to play in stereo in a very wide stereo mix through 3 channels instead of 1, so it's going to have more presence in the mix, and then it just goes out to stereo out. So let's have a listen to that. Now you'll see I'm already maxing out the channel. That is a bit of an issue. We can't max out our channel before we've even started. And you'll notice there's a lot of pre-added effects on our master channel. I tend not to use any of those pre-established effects. They've come from Garageband, and we don't need them. But what we do need is a limiter, but we don't want to be using a limiter just yet. That would be a little bit preemptive. What we've probably got a situation with here is excessive gain to start with, causing this master to max out. So it is generally recommended. It used to be that you pump everything up to a maximum without clipping, but there's a school of thought that keeping your tracks around -18 and allowing headroom for it to burst out if need be is better than maxing out your tracks and then having them distort. So what we want to do is check where our level is. Now you can do this like just by watching the little slider here, or you can use an analyzer to analyze where your average levels are. I'm just going to do it kind of on the fly. So here's my track. Let's see, it's going for -3, so it's just way too much signal. So I'm going to take it back by 15 decibel. This is called gain staging. So now you'll see my crash was 18. Now maybe that's a little bit too low. Maybe I give it a couple more dB so that I've got, because I want my average to be -18, not the whole entire mix. Okay, now I'm not going to max out my master track. Later on, assuming I haven't maxed it out by the time I'm finished mixing down, I will then use a limiter to bring it up to the normality of a normal stereo mix, ready to put into a mastering program. Okay, I'm going to leave it there today and leave you to play around with this environment a little bit yourselves. And next time I'll start digging into how to get a good mix of everything. And a lot of it involves the bussing and the shuffling of signals, but also a little bit of reverb and a little bit of EQ and some compression and things like that. But for now, there is a lot there to unpack. So Go and have fun with it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
DM, developing musicianship online.